Welcome to Productive Joy with Dr. Christy, where fun meets action.
Hi, friends. Welcome to Productive Joy. Oh my goodness, are we in for a treat today, as always. But before we get started, do me a favor. Please follow, subscribe, join me so that you get automatically notified every Tuesday and Wednesday when new episodes drop, because friends like Georgie are going to show up in your inbox and you're going to be so excited that they did, because we are in for a treat today. So if you're not already following, do that, because I'm getting ready to introduce you to a new friend. Georgi Enthoven is an author. She's a coach. She's a Harvard grad. She's also a UC Berkeley grad, which is important too. She is an advocate. She's a mother of three, an adventurer, a lover of companies that combine income and impact. She's a dog mom, and she's my new friend. So please welcome Georgi to Productive Joy.
Thanks so much, Christy. I am thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're going to have some fun today. I have absolutely no doubt. So, as you know, people are finicky and they only listen for a short amount of time. So, what beautiful nugget of wisdom can you drop on them right out of the gate that'll get them to want to listen to this episode?
Well, thinking about wisdom, I learned a really important skill when I was a child, which was I learned to hypnotize a chicken. Yes.
That might be the best one I've heard so far. How does one hypnotize a chicken?
Well, you have to grow up in a rural place. I grew up in South Africa. The reason I bring it up is because half my life I've spent in emerging markets. But one of the things I did in my childhood, instead of being on devices, is I ran around chasing chickens and learned to hypnotize them. So
That's when a chicken is hypnotized. Does it just like fall over in your arm?
No, you grab their beak and you put it into the sand, and I promise I was gentle, and you draw a line back and forth for a little bit, and then eventually they just stay there for a few seconds, and then they snap out of it and run away.
Oh, that's so exciting. What an entertaining party trick. And when was the last time you hypnotized a chicken?
Chicken, well, it was a long time ago. I will give you that. But yeah, thinking about joy on your podcast, that is something that definitely brought me joy as a child.
Oh, well, that brought me joy today. So thanks, Georgie. We can probably just be done now. I think I have some other important things to say. Well, and you mentioned South Africa. That is where you were born. And
Yeah.
then you've lived in 6 different countries. Is that right?
Yeah,
Count the United States?
I am now in the US and I'm an American citizen, but I was born and raised in South Africa. I left when I was around 11. At that point, I went to high school in Canada. And actually, then I spent a year in England. Then I moved back to the US. I lived in Australia for 6 months, then back to the US. And then I met my husband, who is from Mexico City. And I moved there for 10 years, where we had 3 children and their early childhood was spent there, and have now been in San Francisco for 10 years.
Gosh.
So it's an eclectic mix.
For sure. Okay, so what did your parents do that you moved around that much in your early years?
People ask that, but actually they just made one move and I did all the other moving. I think I was just really curious about the world, curious about how people lived. I wanted to have adventures. I love that moment where you let your guard down and you spend time having conversations that you never do in your busy life, and connecting with all different kinds of people, like on a soul to soul level. So for me, I think it was just exploration. And I worked in those different places and had school in some of them. So they all had a purpose, but they weren't the easiest. It required lots of visas and paperwork and making things happen. But I feel lucky to have had those experiences.
Well, and I'm sure those experiences afforded you an awful lot of open-mindedness and different viewpoints and all of that good stuff. So that maybe led you into your career of choice to date. I know you happen to have a book that's about to come out in just a couple months, right? So
Yeah.
Did you say April?
Yeah, it's launching in April, and it's a book called Work That's Worth It. And the idea is that you have 90,000 hours in your career, and that's an awful lot of time. It's a third of your adult life. And what if you could use that to do something amazing in the world and be rewarded well for that work?
Wait a
And
minute. We need to
so,
back up. Okay. So in your intro, I did say that you like a company that can match income and impact. And you just dropped the bomb that it's 90,000 hours we spend at work during our adult life. That is a
yeah,
lot
that's
of
the
hours.
average career of an American worker.
Wow. Oh my
That's a
gosh.
third of your adult life. So you sleep as much as that. And so you've got a third on work, a third on sleep, and a third on what I would say is rest and play
Yeah. So you
and
better
every other
love it.
relationship. You better love it. You,
Yeah.
you better love it. But more importantly, it should connect with what you're here to do in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, how does one figure that out? Because I know people who know their calling, right? Like I'm an educator by trade. I will always be an educator. I cannot help myself. I've done it since I was in kindergarten and I was teaching my stuffed animals to sit in rows. And I know that about me. And so that's what I love more than anything. But I also know people who really struggle to figure out what is it I'm meant to do? I'm not sure. Do you help people
Yeah,
figure that kind
I
of
do.
out?
Yeah, I do it. And I love that. I think often we are closer to our calling than we think, and especially when for the people who don't feel connected to a calling, I think you are closer. Often, what I have found with working with young professionals in particular is they they knew what they were interested in and passionate about from an early age, and then it was either educated out of them or talked out of them by their parents.
Yeah.
It takes a long time to get back to it when that's the case. And so, especially for people who are raised to be people pleasers, look after other people's interests, serve others, you can get quite far away from your calling. Yeah, there's a professor at Yale who says you either have a job, a career, or a calling,
Hmm.
and your happiness goes up with that scale. And so, it is quite unique to find a calling. But the way that I think about it is we spend so much time in school learning skills.
Mm-hmm.
And when you graduating high school, people say, are you going to college? And what are you going to study? And they want you to sort of declare a major. And then
Yeah.
when you're graduating college, they ask, and now what are you going to do? Nobody asks you what you care about.
Right.
Nobody asks you, if you had a magic wand, what would you want to see changed? And so the reason people can't find a calling easily is we're asking the wrong questions of each
Hmm.
other and ourselves. And so I think it's, our education system, you know this as well as I do, is geared towards sitting at a desk or on a factory line and producing.
Yeah.
And so that's unlikely to be a calling. That is a job.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
so one of the ways that I work with people to find your calling is first to spend time thinking about what lights you up, what do you care about, what are you reading about on social media, what are you following, who are you following, where are you spending time, what interests you, where are you wanting to travel, what are you wanting to see. So that's the first thing to notice what's important to you. Often it also is sort of the experiences you've had. If you've had a parent who's dealt with cancer, let's say, or something like that, that can really grab your attention and you want to create meaning out of it. So,
Mm.
and then just top down, I find we miss this step a lot. But what are the big problems in the world we need to solve? And if you don't know where to start on your own individual level of what has grabbed your attention, then if you just focus on what are some of the big problems in the world, you are never going to feel like you've wasted time.
Right. You can't be
And
obsolete if you're solving the problems of the
yeah,
world, right?
yeah. And then the other thing is what I find is really interesting is you don't need permission to make a contribution to the world.
Mm.
You
Mm.
just need to care.
Yeah.
And often people sort of are waiting for permission, like you would to get permission to do a job. This is something you just go do. And by the way, nobody can fire you from your cause or contribution.
Yeah.
So even if you do get laid off, that work continues.
What a powerful way to look at it. You can't get fired from your contribution. Like if you're just volunteering your time or
Yeah.
if you have found a space where you feel like you belong, there's just there's a lot of
Yeah.
joy in what you are saying. I really also appreciate as a mother, right? So I have 23-year-olds, they're twins, and I do believe my daughter has found her calling. Like her legitimate, she's a kindergarten teacher and she is magical with those kids. My son is still looking for his, right? Now he has passions. He's always been my passionate kid, as a matter of fact, passionately cried when he came out of the womb and he really didn't stop from there. But he hasn't found that thing that lights him up inside.
Yeah.
He has a few things that interest him, but he hasn't made the connection yet. And so what advice would you have for my Jackson, who is brilliant and capable and a really, really hard worker, that hasn't figured out how to bring the 2 together?
Yeah. I would say one word, and that is experiment.
Mm. Say more. Add
Um,
to your word. I like it. Experiment.
yeah. So, okay, this is going to be a travel analogy since we are talking about
I
joy.
kinda love
But
it. Go.
yeah, when you are young, you get to stay in youth hostels. When
True.
you're old, you don't want to stay on an
No, thank
uncomfortable
you.
bed with cockroaches and everything. But when you're young, it's so fun to go and do that and meet all the kids and everybody from all different parts of the world and have these amazing, interesting conversations. There's a time and a place in a career for experimenting,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's when you're young. It's really hard to experiment later because you start to have a lot of responsibilities
Mhm.
and it makes it way harder. It's not economical, or you don't have the time or the energy. And so, what I would say is give yourself permission to experiment
Yeah.
and spend the first 10 years experimenting if that's what you need. And I'm not saying go from job to job, it
That's
could
different.
be, but within your job, sign up for things that are outside your department. Ask to be on projects that are collaborations with other areas. Find something you're interested in. Ask if you can take it on within your company. Take free courses. There's amazing courses offered by MIT and Harvard and Stanford. And take some courses. Figure out what lights you up that way. Journal about it, write about it, and think about, okay, why am I interested in this? And start to see what captures your attention. And I would say you'll know you're there because I would say, one, you know how it makes the world better. And if you can answer yes to that, that's your first thing. Your second is it worth at least 5 years of your life? I would say 10, but like,
Yeah.
can you spend at least 5 years of your life on this? Because you don't want the latest, this is not a phase. This is something like long term that you can say, I contribute to the betterment of women, or I contribute to the environment, or I contribute to, what is it? It could be one word, it could be a whole statement. Um, the third is, would you like to be known for this? That people
Mm.
say, like, for instance, in my book, I interview a whole bunch of different people doing amazing work. And let's say one of them says, in my career, I want to end homelessness in my generation. Do you want to be known for that? That's
Yeah.
really powerful, right?
Yes.
And then the last one is, can you align your own capabilities with this opportunity? And so those are the filters that I would use to know that you've got there.
Well, and I can't wait to have that conversation with Jackson and Chloe too, and Cassidy, his fiance, because when you're 23, you do have lots more choices, right? You are staying in the hostels and you're okay with that. But when you're 48, like me, you feel like you can't, and then you do, right? So I've launched my business in the last couple years, and I don't know what I'm doing. And I have a wonderful career that I love and I feel passionate about, but I'm figuring out how to turn that into the next step. I don't ever want to stop, but that doesn't make it any less scary, right? Like it is
Yeah.
truly a frightening experience to go, I'm going to try this new thing. I'm going to figure it out. Here I go. So, Work That's Worth It. That is the title of your book that's coming, but it's also the title of a brand new podcast that you've just launched. And is this the kind of advice and conversation that one would hear if they were listening?
Yeah, 100%. But what I am using the podcast to do is to help young people find pathways that are professionals that are including income and impact into their life. And so it's a variety of different people from all different walks of life. I love getting people from all over the globe, diverse backgrounds, diverse interests. So it could be ethical AI to a law firm focusing on renewable energy to a beauty product with clean beauty to, all sorts of different things. But I think what is difficult when you're young is to understand that you don't have to choose between income and impact, that there are opportunities and it's growing where they're combined. And a
Yeah.
lot of young people are still facing the same issues that I faced as a young, ambitious 20-year-old graduating. I really wanted to do good things in the world,
Yeah.
but I couldn't find a job to pay me sufficiently. So I ended up in tech. And then I decided I was going to teach on the side because I needed to do good somewhere. And
Yeah.
so I went and volunteered as a teacher on the side, and I just kept zigzagging. And then after I was a mother, we're living in Mexico City, and I decided, okay, now I'm going to really focus on impact. But I realized I wasn't earning enough or wasn't feeling rewarded enough to keep going more than 2 years on something. So I was happy to contribute in the short term, but it wasn't going to keep me in the long term.
Mm.
And so the zigzagging is really, for me, what I found made me, I'm really curious, what is work that's worth it?
Yeah.
And, your daughter, for example, is a teacher, and some teachers can feel really fulfilled by that work because it's just incredible to be able to influence students. But there's an enormous amount of teachers who feel very undervalued. And
That part
so
too.
the impact is there, but they're not getting the income. And
Right.
so that's really hard too. And that also leads to burnout. So yeah, I think what I am particularly interested in, and I would say this is my adventure, this is where I explore, is what are the opportunities where there is income and impact.
Oh, that is beautiful. And how exciting that you are researching it, that you have researched it, that you are putting a podcast out there that people can find more information out about it. Because who do you ask, right? Like we kind of sit in these silos, especially once you leave the conventional, okay, I was in high school, now I'm in college, okay, now I'm, in this workspace. But you don't necessarily have a friend group to talk to say, "Well, what are you trying? How's that going?"
Yeah. Yeah.
So how great that your podcast does that. That's so powerful, needed, and fun as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. I think from the work that I've done with young people, especially, is a lot of people, their first filter is, what do my parents do?
Yeah.
And a lot of, if you are a doctor, your kid's more likely to be a doctor. If you're an educator, your kid's more likely to be an
Yep.
educator. And so I think, though, people look ahead, and I have these terms that I use that I help people identify themselves. And it's like the unrewarded do-gooder is
Yeah.
somebody who has huge impact, but are feeling that their reward is not sufficient. And then the opposite of that would be the uninspired achiever,
Yeah.
which is someone who's like, I just need to pay up my debt. I'm only going for money. That's all I care about. And they find usually later on in their career that they have a lot of regret.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so at that point, they can't get off the ladder, or a lot of them say, I've climbed the wrong ladder. And
Yeah.
at that point, it's difficult to get off because you've got a huge amount of expenses, to lifestyle expenses that
Mhm.
are expecting to be supported by that.
Mhm.
My goal is to get the people I work with to be disruptors for good.
Yeah.
And that is where your career is good for you and good for the world. So meaning you are compensated for what you do, and your contribution is fulfilling and can keep you going for the long term.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Well, and now I'm just so very, very curious. How would you describe productive joy then? Because I think you kind of just did, but what would be your description?
Well, in the work frame of mind, I would say it's really fun to be a disruptor. And so I would say that is my equivalent of being a disruptor for good. But I think what's important about play and joy is, I like to think of your time in three buckets. You're either working, you're recharging, or you're playing.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's a formula of like you have to hit so much. I think it's just very individual where you are. But I think sometimes people think play and recharging is the same thing. So they say, okay, I'm going to go have some downtime, or I'm going to go, like, if you are working a huge amount of hours and you really like need to recharge, but you end up going out with your friends, let's say, that is not going to help you recharge. That's fun.
Yeah.
But that's not the recharge. So
Yeah.
I think the play is sort of the ideal, is where those pieces are balanced.
That's awesome. What a great formula. And I really appreciate the thoughtfulness that you've put into making this replicable, right? So it's one thing to know these things. You've lived it, you've lived in a lot of different places, you've seen it from a lot of different angles, but you have figured out a way to package it so that others can grow and learn from both the mistakes and the successes that you've had to make really great things happen. So, when did you decide this was your calling? Because it clearly is. This is
Yeah.
something that has called you. This hasn't just found you.
Well, after COVID, well, during COVID, I got certified in coaching, and I didn't imagine I would like it so much. But what I loved is the conversations that I had with people. I learned that I love learning, so every conversation was new. And
Absolutely.
probably like what you're doing is you don't need to prepare a lot. You just need to come and engage and listen and
Curious.
have a
Yeah.
meaningful conversation, right? And so I was very burnt out after COVID with our 3 children, keeping things on track. And I took a solo vacation where I told everybody they weren't allowed to come with me. And at the last minute, my kids went to camp and I just booked a ticket to Portugal. I rented a car and nobody was in Portugal yet because they just barely opened the country. And I just found my rhythm. And what I mean by that is I didn't even know when I was hungry or what I wanted. And just being by myself with nobody needing me and me being able to really tune into myself,
Yeah.
I got to do this recharging that was very necessary and play as well because I went to the beach and explored the streets and had interesting conversations and drove to all sorts of amazing little coves and kind of beautiful nature that really is important for me. And I just got the download. I don't know how to explain it in any other way, but a lot of creatives talk about this, and you just all of a sudden get a knock at your door. And I had the vision for the book. It came so clearly that I couldn't ignore it. And
Yeah.
when I think of like getting that calling, you get to say yes or no. You get the
Mm.
calling, it says knock, knock. This is the idea. I think you're a great conduit for it. Will you take me? And I just said yes. I was sort of freaked out by how clear, and it just felt like I was in the moment of time that I needed to say yes. And I had just seen a cartoon in the New Yorker that had 2 women sitting on a sofa and they were drinking a drink, and there was the weather in the background, and it was hurricanes, floods, all that on that they were looking at, and they were talking to each other, and they said, "I don't think straws is going to be enough. Giving up straws is going to be enough." And it is humor, and I love that this brilliant artist was be able to put that in such a beautiful way because it's true. It's not enough.
Mhm.
And then I thought, oh my God, the career's 90,000 hours. Like, what if we used our careers for something more meaningful? And it just kind of, it snowballed from there. And actually, one of the ways you know you're on your right path is doors open.
Yeah.
And I did not want to be an author, want to start a podcast. Like, these were not what I was going out to do, but it's in service of the mission that I have. And I'm honoring that mission because it just really feels important to me. And I can look my kids in the eye and say that I really feel proud of the work that I have done.
Georgie, that was beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. It is clear that you are exactly where you're supposed to be, and you are doing some pretty magnificent stuff, and your kids are super proud. I have no doubt. How old are your children?
My youngest is 12 and the oldest is 18. So I have
So
12, 16, and 18.
they're going to
They're
remember this
behind
part.
yours.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
gonna remember this part. They're gonna remember it well, and they're going to see when you lit up, and that's what they're gonna remember about their mama. And so good on you because they're probably not gonna have to wait until they've done a whole lot of things to figure out what that passionate thing is that they're gonna do. It's gonna be exciting to watch.
Yeah.
That's
And it may take
they
it may
need a
take
waiver.
time. Yeah. As I think of like, as I was zigzagging, part of my zigzagging is like the scenic route. I took,
Mm.
all my experiences didn't make sense from one to the other, but I can connect them now and see what I got out of them.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
yeah,
and the thing that I'm learning about Gen Zers and also alphas, I guess your 12-year-old would be
yeah,
an alpha.
fairly. Yeah.
But what I'm learning about Gen Zers is that they don't want to be told how to solve a problem. They want to be part of the solution. So they very much want you like if you were working with somebody in that age group and you said, "I need 3 social media posts on my desk by Tuesday," they're going to balk at that and be like, "Yeah, no." But if you said, "I need more engagement on my site and I need to figure out how to do X, Y, and Z," go, they're all over it, right? Now, they might still have 3 social media posts that they create, but they're going to come in their own way because everything for them has been Googleable, right? Like if we're going to use that as a verb, they can Google it so they can find the answers. They don't need somebody to help them find the answers. They need somebody who believes in them enough to trust them to go find whatever they're looking for. And so I think that's what you're empowering your children to do, and you're empowering all of us to do, which
Yeah.
I'm very appreciative of. So thank you. And Georgie, I could legitimately keep talking, but people will stop listening, and we don't want that. So I do
No.
have a couple things. First, how can people find you? Because you've got all this great stuff coming out. And what's the best way
Yeah.
for somebody to find you?
For the podcast, you can search Work That's Worth It on any of the main podcast outlets. So that's the easiest. The second, I'll spell my name, but I have a website, which is georgienthoven.com, and that's GeorgiEnthoven.com. And if you can find me on social media, it's at Georgi Enthoven on Instagram. And if you want a way to get going on like 5 steps to get you going on this path to become a disruptor for good, if you type in the word disruptor on any of my posts, we'll get a free resource out to you.
So exciting. Okay, y'all. So all you have to do is look up Georgi Enthoven on any of the socials and then just type in disruptor. So great. Thank you for giving free resources and for being a light in a world where there's not a whole lot of beacons going on. Like we've got a lot of distractors, but not a lot of disruptors. And I am so appreciative of you wanting to be a disruptor. I think that's fabulous. But I do have some rapid fire questions for you. This is my favorite part. Are you ready?
Okay. Yes.
Okay, take a deep breath because here we go.
All right.
Question number 1. What's your definition of fun?
Play.
Play. I love it. And you can do that just about anywhere, can't you?
Yeah.
Even if you're in Portugal by yourself in 2020, the thing I appreciated about that story was no constraints, right?
Yeah.
When I feel like it, I'm not going to eat at 12 because somebody says that that's lunchtime. I'm just going to go with me. Ah, that's beautiful. Do you speak Portuguese?
I don't. Well, my kids may not say I speak Spanish, but I do. I've lived in Mexico for 10 years and spoke Spanish, and all life is in Spanish, but I make mistakes. But yes, I do. So I can understand some Portuguese.
Okay. Well, that's just, if I'm going by myself, I'm going to go to a country that I can speak the language. That's just me. Okay. How do you know that you're showing up as your authentic self?
The first thing for me is, well, I would say one word, integrity. And how I know that I am living with integrity is I have energy for the things that I'm doing.
Mm.
And I say because I tend to I was raised in South Africa, which is probably 10 years behind the US as social structures. And girls were really raised to be in service of others. And I put my needs really far behind everybody else's. And it took a long time to realize that I was cheating myself and everybody else on the authentic me. And so that it takes more energy to be somebody else.
Every time. Every time we got to
Yeah.
take the mask off, right? Okay. How do you channel your best self on your worst days?
I think this is where knowing that you're contributing to something bigger in the world beyond you it's like an energy source that just keeps you going. So I think all of us should expect to have good days and bad days. On those bad days, it's really important to know what you're here for, what you're working on is important to what you're doing in your life, the people you're spending time with. But on a tactical level, I would just say change pace. So like what I did in Portugal, I had to get away to really detach from all the stress and hard work that COVID required. But on a day-to-day, maybe you go for a cold dip in the ocean. Maybe you go for a hike in the woods. Maybe you call a friend and have a great conversation. Maybe you go get an ice cream. Whatever it is, but break it up and give yourself a break. And I think that's where the joy comes in. Like I actually I have a theory, especially when days are really hard, is you can't necessarily control what the bad things in your life. You can't necessarily, sometimes it just comes your way.
Mm-hmm.
But what you can do is put stuff on your plate so that the percentage of that gets smaller and smaller. And so that is, when you're feeling really overwhelmed, what are you putting on your plate that makes that piece a smaller portion of your mind share, your day, your time?
I love that. Put some good stuff on your plate because we do have influence over that, don't we? All right,
Yeah.
last question, and it's going to be a tough one because you have dropped some beautiful nuggets of wisdom. But if people have to take all of the brilliant things that you said and bring it into one thing, what's the one thing that you really want people to walk away with today?
Yeah, I love that question. And I do think the very first thing is that you've got 90,000 hours in your career. I think we've talked about it a little bit already, but it's such an important piece of your life and time. And being intentional with that time really can change the trajectory of your life and the impact you have, the joy you feel, the how proud you are of your time, your work. So I think just letting that sink in, 90,000 hours.
That's a long time, right? So I'm not going to spend it doing things I don't love, right? I mean, and that doesn't mean that you're going to love everything about your job. That's not anything about what you're saying. What you're saying is, are you having the same impact that you want to, and that the income matches, right? That's the
Yeah.
perfect storm if we can make that happen. So, Georgie, thank you so much. You could have been doing a whole lot of other things, but you're not. You spent time with the Productive Joy family, and you shared some beautiful discoveries and ideas and thoughts. And I'm so grateful that you chose to share your brilliance with us. And I know all of you listening are going to walk away with something that you can use right away, which is the goal of Productive Joy, is that you get a little productive joy out of listening and that you learn something that you can turn around and use, because you know that it's my goal for you to figure out a way to turn fun into action.